Hello, listeners. Welcome to the Lone Screenplay Nominee Podcast, where we talk about films that were solely nominated for an Oscar in the writing categories. I'm your host, Matthew Anderson, and today we have Jacob Klainberg. Am I pronouncing that right?
It's pronounced Kleinberg, but it's either way, it's fine.
Okay. Oops. Already messing up today, folks. But anyways, yeah. So welcome to the show, Jacob. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm just really tired, honestly.
Yeah, I was a little bit tired this morning, but I got some caffeine here with me and a little bit of water, so I should be good. So before we take in deep dive with our episode of your choosing for the film that you've selected for the podcast, I have some questions I just want to get through in terms of asking said guests. I always ask. My first one is: would you care to explain to our audience what exactly it is you do for a living?
I work in a small retailer in Long Island, New York.
Okay.
And so I've worked there for just coming up 3 years.
Do you do anything in your spare time outside of during your job at working at retail?
I do. I play tennis. I do bowling. I see a lot of movies. I try to write.
Yeah.
if I have the time or drive.
Yeah, no, I hear you. That's for certain. So the second question I want to ask you, I always ask is, it's always tough to ask what someone's favorite film is. So I might as well ask, what is your favorite genre of film?
Drama.
Drama? Okay. And any particular reasons as to why that's your favorite of all the genres that you've seen for films?
I think because there's more stakes at hand, more scenarios, more conflict than comedy, which is more just misunderstandings. But I think if I had to say something other than drama specifically, like a subgenre, I really like thrillers.
Yeah, there's some pretty good thrillers out there too. Yeah, I'm trying to even think of. God, I'm having a brain fart here. But there definitely are a lot of thrillers out there in the world, and dramas. Yeah, like you said, you can create stakes in terms of dramas compared to compared to other genres, so to speak. So, yeah. So today we're just gonna dive into our episode. We're gonna discuss Full Metal Jacket from 1987. This won't be a beat by beat bulletin presentation like you hear on other channels, but we will be discussing major spoilers for our talk. If you haven't seen the film yet and want to hear our full thoughts on it, watch the film first and then come back to hear us talk about it. I'm pretty sure it's not only on Max, the app for HBO Max it used to be, but it's also available on 4K Blu-ray. If anyone is interested out there, last time I checked, it was like $16-17 to buy a 4K copy. It's I watched mine on a regular Blu-ray. I'm not sure if you watched it through the Max app.
I watched it on my old DVD of it that I've had for I think 7-8 years.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow.
So it's still in good format. So I'd still recommend it. Anything that's not HBO, to be honest, at the moment.
No, I gotcha. So anyways, and yeah, that was not a a plug-in for Max. It was just a general, in case anyone's wondering where to get a copy of their film. So anyways, I'm just going to run down through the production notes real quick, and then we'll get into our discussion and ask each other some questions about the film. So filmmaker Stanley Kubrick met Michael Herr, who wrote a book about the Vietnam War called Dispatches. He also met Gustav Hasford, who was the author of the book the film was based upon, called The Short Timers, is what the book was. And with the help of those two authors/writers, Stanley Kubrick co-wrote the screenplay with them to create Full Metal Jacket, in which he based it more closely on Gustav's book, The Short Timers. The production budget was reportedly $17 million and was filmed within a 30-mile radius of Stanley's home. The production itself lasted for over a year, as he shut down production for 5 months following a near-death accident for actor R. Lee Hermey. The two production notes I do want to bring up for the film is, one, to get the look of the film, Stanley insisted that they shot the film using natural lighting and achieved a newsreel effect by making the Steadicam shots less steady, which Stanley Kubrick has also been known for using natural lighting when he did Barry Lyndon as well, which got those gorgeous cinematography shots that you saw there in that film. Would also highly recommend people see Barry Lyndon if you haven't gotten a chance to. And the second note was, even though Stanley Kubrick is known for being his, having a lot of perfectionism for his films, they would typically shoot scenes that are at least 30 takes, on average for each scene. And with most of R. Lee Hermey's scenes, not only did he have to do 2 to 3 takes per scene, but he also was allowed to improvise his dialogue with the actors, as his previous experience of being a drill instructor was enough to convince Stanley Kubrick that he got the right actor for it. The only other scene I know that R. Lee Ermey, the instructor, had to shoot like 30 plus takes for was the jelly donut scene, which we might talk about later on in the show. But the film was a box office hit overall and was praised by most critics. In a famous episode on the movie review show At the Movies, Roger Ebert disagreed with Gene Siskel on the film and stated that while he praises the performances of R. Lee Hermey and Vincent D'Onofrio, he criticized the film's Vietnam set second act, saying that the movie disintegrates into a series of self-conflicted set pieces, none of them quite satisfying, and concluded the film's message is too little and too late, having been done by other Vietnam War films at the time, like Apocalypse Now and Platoon. And outside of its lone writing Oscar nomination the film had received, it also got 2 BAFTA nominations for sound and visual effects, a Golden Globe nomination for Best Supporting Actor for R. Lee Hermey's performance, a Writers Guild of America nomination in the Adapted Screenplay category, and it also won 2 awards from the Boston Society of Film Critics groups for Director and Supporting Actor for R. Lee Hermey. So the log line as for what the film is, it's in case anyone isn't aware, Full Metal Jacket for whatever reason, but it's been out for so many years. So anyways, so the log line of the film is a pragmatic U.S. Marine observes the dehumanizing effects the Vietnam War has on his fellow recruits, from their brutal boot camp training to the bloody street fighting in Hue. I think I pronounce Way. I could be butchering that pronunciation, but yeah, that's pretty much the premise, the setting of the film. So I wanted to ask Jacob, for you, what was your reasoning for picking this film out of the list that I gave you? And I'd assume you'd seen, I'd assume you'd seen more Stanley Kubrick films.
Well, Stanley Kubrick is my favorite director.
Okay.
Of all time. So I think the moment I saw your list and I saw Paths of Full Metal Jacket, I was like, I have to pick this, because this I think is one of his top 5. Because my number 1 is like my number 2 film of all time for him. So. And I think he's one of the most underrated writers, I think. Because I think one of his directorial catalog is really stunning. But I think, unlike, say, the director of The Searchers, which I think is still a really good movie, I think there's not much story there. And while I do think this should have gotten more Oscar nominations, I think screenplay seems the most I understand it.
Yeah, we'll definitely be talking about what happened or what might have happened with that area in terms of why it got the lone screenplay nomination. We'll talk about that down the road. How did you first, out of curiosity though, what was your first experience or encounter with any of Stanley Kubrick's films to begin with? Was this your first one, or was there something else?
No, when I want to say 14, I watched A Clockwork Orange,
Oh,
and by choice, like I got the Blu-ray from, I want to say, a Walmart. It was like a 3-pack of Shining, uh, 2001, and A Clockwork Orange. So that was the first time back in. I was still in like early high school at this point,
mm-hmm.
and I think it was the first X-rated movie I'd ever seen. And I think I actually didn't really watch any Kubrick movies till 2017 when I was in college. And then back in 2019, I think I watched almost every other movie he made except for Eyes Wide Shut. So I've seen everything he's made but Eyes Wide Shut.
Okay. And I assume down the road you'll probably watch Eyes Wide Shut, or?
Well, yes. The reason I didn't watch it at the time is because it's at college. I didn't have a copy of it, and also I was too busy with schoolwork.
Yeah.
But I just bought it on DVD recently, so yes, very soon I hope to watch it.
Yeah, I've only seen my experience with Stanley Kubrick films is I've only seen, I'm looking through here, Doctor Strangelove, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Barry Lyndon, and The Shining. And so we're recording this on March 25th, so it's like a Monday. And the day before was my first time I'd seen Full Metal Jacket. So it's like now my 5th Stanley Kubrick film. I own Paths of Glory, and there were a couple times in the last week or so that I almost wanted to throw it on, but like when I watch these kind of older films, I need to be in the right headspace, and I don't want to watch it while I'm like, about to pass out or not feeling too well or anything. But I will definitely be watching Paths of Glory and some of his other stuff down the road. So anyways, so circling this back to Full Metal Jacket, what was your thoughts on the film overall? On the film, or first impressions, I should say.
Well, the first time I saw this was 2019, so this was actually the second time I've seen it.
Okay.
So, and actually, I remember back in 2019, I took like detailed notes of everything. So when I look back at what I wrote then and then what I added, so I'm just surprised how detailed, even in 2019, I took this film. How seriously I took all the things that happened.
Yeah, I will admit, on a first watch, there was a lot to process on a first watch for me, because this was my first viewing I'd seen of it. Period. And like a lot of Stanley Kubrick films, they're ones where, all of them so far have been very much like, I really like the film a lot from what I'm seeing, but I may need to rewatch them like a couple of times to sort of get all the details in my brain. But he was a very gifted filmmaker, and one that I totally understand why so many people hold him in such high regard. And every time I watch a film of his, I'm like, oh, now I keep, now I remember why everyone considered him like the greatest of all time in terms of directors. And Full Metal Jacket, for me, I was really impressed with the movie as a whole. I was really impressed with what he had to bring as a director. And even if the story, like, we'll definitely get, I do understand where Ebert's coming from, where it does feel like a vignette of short stories coming together as a whole. But I don't think that's really a problem necessarily, only because I never noticed until halfway through the movie that the main character, played by
Matthew Modine.
Yeah, Matthew Modine, who was also in the most recent Oscar-winning film for Best Picture, Oppenheimer. And he is a journalist, had done journalism in high school, and he's a part of this this little squad that does like the newspaper Stars and Stripes. And what's interesting is that the way the narration is scattered throughout the film, it's almost like he's writing it like a journal diary entry for like each day almost, talking about the days every so often, especially during his time when he's working for the Stars and Stripes newspaper company or newspaper, group. And yeah, and I was really and I'm like, okay, like that actually does make sense as to why these there's not really much of like a narrative hook or one that feels like a linear story almost. It just feels like a lot of scenes plotted here and there throughout. But again, it's not a bad thing at all, but rather it just shows you that the ways of war. And the film isn't spoon feeding you either with the material. It's not spoon feeding you with what they're presenting in the film. And unlike Platoon, there is no main central villain of the film. Like there's no villain that is either, like he's just like a bad, a bad apple in the higher up within the group, or they're not trying to hunt down that's like this sniper and like American Sniper or whatever. And that's something that I didn't, just little details like that in terms of the structuring that I was pretty impressed with. What were some notes that you would conjure up on your viewing? Because I got plenty of notes we can go through from my end, but I'm just curious about your end.
Well, when you talk about a movie with no villain, it reminded me of The Thin Red Line,
Okay.
which is another movie where I will compare to this movie in a little bit, but basically what I'm saying right now is a very multi-character movie where even though there is one main character, they're not the focus. Because I think for a good amount of the movie, I forgot what the main character's name was in this.
The Matthew
I
Modine character,
Yes, because it's
Joker.
well, no, that's his.
His nickname, yeah. JT Davis.
Yes. So I I think for him, or at least for like this kind of war movie, like that's a post mortem of the event. This isn't a movie where a character learns to love their situation. They just exist in it.
Yeah, they sort of embrace they either embrace the absurdity or they're just not able to go along for the ride. Yeah, that is true. Actually, yeah, because even the Vincent D'Onofrio character early on in the film, like he's a character that is going a bit crazy, and a lot of it is because he's not able to uh he's unable to adapt to his scenario and his environment, whereas a lot of the other recruits are. Even with his his pain in the ass drill instructor played by Arlie Hermy, which we already brought up. I come to think of it. What do you think of Arlie Hermy in the film?
I think it is his. I'm not all familiar with Arlie Ermy other than this movie,
Oh,
but because he's not really someone I really ever. The thing about Kubrick movies, a lot of them, is that the actors themselves, unless I know them from other work, like say a Peter Sellers or a Jason was it a what's his name from Lolita? I don't remember his name, but
James Mason.
James Mason. Unless I know them from other work, then I can compare to their other stuff. But I also read that he was a Marine guy. So basically, this was him just reliving his experience, which is why
Yeah.
I think it's very intense.
Yeah, and it's funny too because he also managed to he managed to recapture some of that. I mentioned earlier in the episode how Kubrick had wrote out all this dialogue for Ermy to cite to play as the drill sergeant. And then he realized, I think, like after the first day of filming, he was like, "Oh no, I don't need to write this dialogue. You go off," And he's like, only needs like 2 or 3 takes at best for some of the scenes, which really stunned me, especially when the movie started and we see that long shot of the camera following the drill sergeant walking around in the barracks, and we see him just following around, and yeah, and I just that's myself like, oh my god, I keep forgetting that. Like Kubrick has a lot of like he has a perfectionism to him, like David Fincher is, where he's like multiple takes upon multiple takes, and no matter what. and uh and I really like that a lot about about Kubrick, but again, it was just like he had complete faith in him. He's like, you know what you're doing, and and I don't need to give you much dialogue. Just go right off and do whatever you want. We'll follow along. The only other scene that I mentioned this earlier, that he had that Ermi didn't have any, he had to actually follow the script, and they ended up doing like 30 takes of, was the jelly donut scene. And what I liked about that from Kubrick's point of view, and I'm not sure if you'll agree with me on this, Jacob, was I really liked that visually he was able to show, like, you could see that the drill sergeant was really getting to the private, who was played by Vincent D'Onofrio. His character was Private Leonard.
Or Gomer Pyle.
Yeah,
Gomer Pyle, which is a Andy Griffith show character who
yeah,
got his own spinoff. But
yeah, and yeah. So, like I said, and that was something, and I like that visually he was able to tell us or show us that he was really breaking this guy. Like, he was definitely, excuse me, he was definitely breaking this character, and you could see just within his eyes that he was slowly getting to this private, and it kind of led to his shocking moment where he ends up turning the gun. Takes the gun and shoots the drill sergeant and himself in the bathroom, which was a pretty shocking moment, I must say.
I think, as far as Ermi and D'Onofrio's relationship goes in that movie, I think there was some really, really good. He doesn't hate him because he's fat to him. He hates him, and he hates everyone in like a sort of, I have to muscle these people up to kill our enemies, and I don't like them, but I have to work with what I have. So the way he, like with the jelly donut scene, the way he basically punishes the rest of the battalion by basically saying, whatever he does, like if he messes up, then the rest of the group suffers. And I think immediately the scene of him having the donut and then watching as his fellow Marines are doing their push-ups,
Mm.
leading into the scene that where they all beat him at night with where they hold him down and assault him with a bar of soap in a rag. I think up until that point, I hadn't thought of him as someone who was unable to do it because he didn't want to, but I just think he just wasn't good at it. So the way he turns from that scene. Did you see the new Dune?
I did.
Because there's a scene where there's a blue liquid. I'm not gonna. If anyone hasn't seen it, I won't say it. But there's a scene where that happens, and then it just changes. Like you see exactly what's gonna happen. So for me, it's that scene where he gets beaten. He's outside training. He barely says a word after that. Like he's until I think, except for when he says like yes sir to the
Drill sergeant.
sergeant, he has very few lines of dialogue up until his final scene.
Yeah.
And I think there's something so chilling about the fact that he was he was trying, but he broke, and now all he can think about is how he wants to somehow make it get out of there, or what he wants to do. So I think the moment that he becomes, and the more he earns Ermi's respect, the less he desired it, and the more it angers him at what he had to do to get there. And the moment he's put in infantry is the moment he realizes he's just a soldier. He has no unique qualities to him. He's just a man who's going to shoot people. And I
Yeah.
think the only recourse he might have had was he doesn't want to be that guy, so he just uh, goes insane in the bathroom and causes a ruckus, which causes what's his name?
The
The sergeant. What's his name?
the character's name is Gunner
Hartman.
Hartman. Yeah,
Hartman.
Hartman.
He who causes Hartman to come in, demands he put the gun down, and then he gets shot in the most Stanley Kubrick way,
Yeah.
and which is slow motion, which I respect.
Yeah.
And then he puts the gun on himself. So I was shocked how little dialogue he has. And I think there's something like he's a silent killer, which I think is his. I kind of prefer D'Onofrio in this to say, I don't know, other movies he's been in where he's been in villains, because he's a villain not born out of personal destruction, but out of. He's just built in a different way that makes him unable to do what others can do. And he basically reacts negatively from that.
Well, and the other thing about D'Onofrio though is well, like yeah, like whenever he's playing a villain, save for like Jurassic World, it's a very like stock character, and he's got to recite a lot of dialogue. But Kubrick he's very much aware as a filmmaker and as a storyteller. I don't need to really write that much dialogue to establish a character, like especially a character going through an arc of some type, because it's all there within the performance. I just need to find an actor who's able to get the best, and pull the best, juice out of them for my film. And, even with someone like Shelley Duvall in The Shining, which, was a terrible experience with what she had to go through for that film, but he was, it almost seemed like he was aware of like, yeah, like Shelley Duvall could play this like horrific, terrified mom really, really well. And make it feel believable too when it's all said and done. And same thing with this. It's like, I got Vincent D'Onofrio, and I'm able, I could sell this character in terms of his like, especially his emotional breakdown so well without giving so much dialogue. And it works for that, like you said.
Did you know that I'm just looking. This is not D'Onofrio's debut, but this is his second movie.
Yeah, I just saw, which is nuts.
Which
yeah.
I'm really surprised. Maybe this movie unfortunately typecasted him, but I think this being a sophomore effort is really incredible.
It did. If anything, it did put him as like a character actor. Like he definitely isn't someone like Tom Cruise, who's like a big star making leading role. I mean, not everyone is born to be that way, but at the same time, it even looking through Vincent D'Onofrio's filmography, like he's in JFK, he's in Ed Wood, Men in Black, the Cell. Like he's gone on to work with really interesting and unique directors. Yeah. So yeah. So I yeah, and so long as he's okay with being this character actor, which it's clearly he probably is, because he's been in the industry that long, and I haven't heard any complaints from him last time I checked. But yeah, no, but that's that's fine. Not everyone. It's different careers, for different actors. So I don't know. That's just me though.
That's fine. I kind of wanted more out of Matthew Modine. Not that I think he's bad, but I just think he's like the third character in his own, and he's the I think first build character, right? Is he the first build?
I believe he is. He's first build.
And it feels like for like 45 to 50 minutes, until the movie really gets to Vietnam, he doesn't have anything to do. That's not to say he's a bad actor or he's not nuanced, but I think he's limited in what he's allowed to do.
I think it's the character. I think it's the way it's written because because I actually do think Matthew Modine he's a good he's a good character actor too. Like, you know, he does a lot of small bits here and there. Like he's in The Dark Knight Rises and he's in Oppenheimer as well. But I think part of the reason why he's not given so much to do until the second half of the film is because, well, one, Hartman, it was Sergeant Hartman in the film, the drill instructor, is you know, he takes up the majority of that first half of the film, and we're led to believe that he or Vincent D'Onofrio are like the main leads of the film, and we're not really, and we're sort of taken off guard when they're both out of the picture, and now we got to follow this, you know, JT Davis character through the rest of the film, and he's been in the film for a while. Like I kind of figured he was going to be our lead anyways, um just because he had more scenes as a whole. Like he was interacting with a couple of his cadets, like when he was cleaning up the bathroom and he's, you know, warning his buddy who they reunite later in the film, saying about how, you know, was it the Gomer Pyle is you know, Leonard's is a bit off because he's always talking to his weapon. And even you know, even his character, which I thought his character was a bit fascinating to me, just because even though the idea of like this, you know, dual personality psyche kind of character has been done before in war films and Vietnam, I did enjoy the way Kubrick had presented that character in his film for this, especially for Vietnam, because Vietnam at the time, the Vietnam War itself was a war that everyone was very conflicted on at the time. You know, people were like, you know, very much for, like, we should be there and fighting, you know, fighting this war. And then there's other people who were just like, yeah, you're better off just going to Canada too. And I like that that the way that Kubrick writes that character in the film. But yeah, but like I said, but long story short, I think personally it's the way the character is written that um excuse me, that might be why Matthew Modine doesn't get to do a whole lot in the film.
When we get to Vietnam and he's a journalist, I think he's there as a surrounding force to other soldiers. So he's basically there to make them look, I don't want to say more intense or more strong, but they're the men with the guns and he's the men with the camera. And I think there's a difference between how he's positioned versus the men with the literal guns, who are, some of them are his friends, like Cowboy, who was also in the whole battalion scene.
Yeah.
So I think he's given in the whole movie. I think it's just a more nuanced character than who doesn't get like a big emotive scene, which isn't needed if the character's just compelling. But I kind of wish he'd done more. I wish he'd been more proactive personally than he was.
I was okay with that. You know, I could see the criticism for that character, but I was fine with that being what it was, because again, like he kind of has this like dual side, and being a journalist, he is kind of reporting the news, not being in the news itself. And but that's just me. Like I said, I was fine with it. I did want to ask, did you recognize who the Sergeant Animal Mother was, the actor?
Let me look it up right now.
He was the one with the big machine gun, played by Adam Baldwin.
Do I know who he is?
Or... Well, I was just curious if you had seen him in anything before, because when I saw him on screen, I immediately was like, "Yep, that's the guy from Chuck, one of the super agents."
I've never seen Chuck, actually. I'm looking at his filmography and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna be honest here. I don't know if I'd seen any of his like films.
Okay,
so let me just look at his TV stuff.
Well, while you're doing that, for anyone out there listening right now, he was before Adam Baldwin took on the part, Arnold Schwarzenegger was in the running for the role. He declined to do the film because he wanted to do a little Stephen King film called a Stephen King story that was adapted into a film called The Running Man.
Wait, that's cool. That's Stephen King.
Yeah, Stephen King adapted. So Stephen King did The Running Man, the book of it, under a pseudonym of Richard Bachman.
Huh.
Yeah, it's a pen
Which,
name that Stephen King uses for a couple of his books.
by the way, when you bring up Schwarzenegger I think Schwarzenegger's too muscular for that kind of character. But also, fun fact: I've never seen a movie with him ever. Like, he's never been in a movie I've seen.
Not
But
even
and
the
it would,
Terminator films.
I've never seen those. I've never seen a single
Okay.
movie he's ever been in.
Okay.
But I think the difference is between, say, an Alan Baldwin, which I think Schwarzenegger's he's a good image of what you want to see in your action stars. But
yeah,
I think he's not an accent guy. Like, that's not a criticism of him, but because he could not be a believable American. I just don't, as like a veteran like that.
he played the American in Predator. I'm pretty sure Arnold Schwarzenegger, that is. But I do hear it because when I was thinking to myself, I'm like, ooh, Arnold is in a Stanley Kubrick film. That would have been interesting. But as the film went on, I'm like, I'm actually glad Adam Baldwin did it. Only because if Arnold were in it, he would have stuck out like a sore thumb. Not in a bad way, but more like, that's a really odd choice, whereas Adam Baldwin just kind of fits right into the movie for me.
The thing about Schwarzenegger is the same thing I get about like a Dwayne Johnson now, where it feels like no, I bring it up because it feels like he has one of those things where he can't come off bad in his movies. And I'm like, the character is a bad person.
Yeah.
That I don't think Schwarzenegger would have been able to sell.
I think Schwarzenegger can sell that. Dwayne Johnson, I don't think he could have.
No. I bring up Dwayne not as like not for this character, but I mean like someone who, if they're in a movie, it feels like, and
they're always playing the good guy.
That, or it looks like they can't take like the serious character hits. Like they're not going to do these big dramatic things that he does. That I think Adam Baldwin is like a big character actor, right? Like, he's not like a huge. He's not one of the Baldwins, like not one of the other ones.
No. I don't think he's related to any of them.
Which is still really funny. There's five of them, and only one's not part of that group. But he really sells how he's not a bad person. He's just a man of war, and he doesn't know any better.
Yeah.
And I really like what he does.
Well, all I will say in regards to Arnold is, if you get a chance, you should watch some of his films. I would recommend the first two Terminator films and True Lies if you get a chance. Because I think Arnold works pretty well in that. And but like I said, I understand. Yeah, Adam Baldwin, you could believably buy him as this character, even though I do think Arnold would fit that role. It's just with the way that his persona was, he would be like, again, just like a bit distracting because it's like a well-known actor, so to speak, with Arnold.
I think if he was in the movie, Arnie would be like, he'd be one of the guys who shot in the end, like
maybe
like Defoe was in Platoon, kind of thing. Where
spoilers for Platoon, everyone. Oops.
That movie's older than this.
Yeah,
which is like very funny to me. But what do you think of? Do you like? Are there any of the other actors that you think stand out?
Well, besides the four we already mentioned, Ermey, D'Onofrio, Baldwin, and Modine, not really. Everyone does a good enough job in their roles. And like they fit their roles well enough. There was no one that was distractingly bad or anyone else that stood out outside of those four that I just wanted to bring up. But yeah, that was pretty much it for all the actors. So
I think I bring it up because one of my few criticisms of Kubrick is he focuses on the main people, but like little for the background people, and like like if they share a sizable amount of screen time, it feels like they're just there. Like they don't have personality. They're just meant to help the main character. So I'm just trying to think, was there like they did good, but there's nothing to really talk about with them. They're just other soldiers.
Yeah, and sometimes that's all, for a movie like this, you're expected to get like a whole platoon or battalion of soldiers there, and I don't know. Yeah, just it could also be just the way the book was, the book itself was handled, because I never got a chance to read the book, The Short Timers, by Gustav Hasford, but I do wonder if that could have been like another thing where it's like the book doesn't really give a whole lot of characters outside of the uh, outside of the ones in the film. So
So
anyway,
I think it really is like the Thin Red Line, where there it's just a ton of actors that you recognize, but it's not so much of the characters,
yeah,
which is fine for a war film. I think if it's beautifully shot.
yeah. So, well, at least Stanley Kubrick didn't edit someone out and out of the film and made them be a small supporting role without telling them.
I don't know who you're referring to.
Adrian Brody for Thin Red Line. Because he was supposed to be the lead of that movie, and then they didn't even tell him until he didn't even find out that he wasn't even the lead anymore until he was at like a press junket, and there was like a reporter who's like, "And what part are you playing, Adrian Brody?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm the lead in the film." I'm like, "No, we never saw you much in the film." They're like, "Oh," and so he got furious. So,
Does does Matthew Modine have that many lines of dialogue either? Does he have like
um,
he doesn't really have a big scene. He's not given a scene of like words, like a wordy moment, right?
no, but again, not every role needs to have that. Not every role needs to play with like a big, why is this war? So why are we in this war? Or, none of that. And I'm fine with that, honestly. And I'm glad. And again, I'm glad Kubrick didn't spoon feed us some of this material. We could sort of interpret, what he's trying to say through the visuals and the actions of these men who are off in their war. Even at the ending with the whole, killing of the the sniper, sniper at the end, the one who shot down like two or three of their buddies, including Cowboy, and
In the most slow mo shots, I think Kubrick. I don't know. I think there's something about that where it's like the scene where they get shot like multiple times. They keep getting back up and getting shot again.
yeah.
Where I know it's serious, but there's something about the way he shoots it. It's like a dark Family Guy joke. If
It's
that
well,
makes
it's a
any
style.
sense.
Yeah, it's a style that he's used to doing. Yeah,
That's fine. It's very entertaining. I just
yeah.
think this is his. I I want to say this movie is his most thematically less. The movies where like a lot of his movies have like pretty much like solid endings, or like they have endings that you kind of feel satisfied with. When this doesn't, like they're still in the war, they're still going to do what more of what they did. They just escaped that day.
Well, it was a good thing actually after the movie was done, which I thought was like a satisfying way to end the movie as it was, with them walking off and singing the
Mickey
Mickey
Mouse Club,
the miss yeah that
the MICKEYMOUSE,
yeah
the original
yeah,
song.
yeah, that song, yeah. And I was it was a good thing I finished that movie, and then afterwards I watched like the 30-minute documentary that was, or featurette on the movie. And one of the people on there, I cannot remember who said it, but they said the film wasn't just a commentary on the Vietnam War, but it was on on war in the future, and that you send these people off to war, you're going to take away their humanity, uh, and they'll have to become these, these kind of people that you're now forcing them to become. And yeah, that story is very much like, oh well, we've already done it like this, but the way Kubrick does it is really, really interesting and makes it a bit more complex than just what the message is, so to speak. So
Yeah.
but yeah, so before we get into our awards talk of the Full Metal Jacket, or what we would have liked to have seen, if there's any other categories you would have liked to have seen this get in for, any final thoughts on the film itself?
How do you feel about the how do you feel about the movie's portrayal of the Asian characters? Like, do you think it could have been held better, or do you
I
think this kind of story you have to have them like that?
I I'm fine with it at the time, and obviously you have to look at it too when this was made at the time. Um, I was fine with it, although I could understand if people were to say they were very offended by the portrayals of the people. But the whole time I was thinking to myself, I was like, okay, I'm a little bit conflicted here, like. But again, you have to look at what the time period was when this was made, and obviously, uh, and again, like that's, I don't know, it didn't bother me as much.
I will say there is a lot of this movie where it feels like, oh, this is rated R, and I'm like, but then the rest of the movie that happens, I was like, oh yeah, I see it.
No,
But it like,
yeah. The moment the movie started, I'm like, yeah, this is rated R. There's no way you're gonna get this by with like a PG or PG-13 rating. Absolutely no way.
I'm
And
shocked it wasn't. I'm shocked it wasn't X though. Like, or is it not enough? You think?
well, it's not as graphic, and they actually cut out the. I know in some of the behind the scenes stuff, and even I was looking on IMDb trivia, there were a couple of scenes that they had to cut out, like after the Modine character shot the sniper with the pistol. Um, the
Can I spoil who that was, or is there, or do you want to?
what?
The girl, when it's like when she's basically asks for a mercy killing. What is that? Is that not how the scene was supposed to end?
Well, no. What it was supposed to end was so it ends at that way in the movie. But how it was supposed to end was the Matthew Modine character. No, not the was it Animal Mother? The Adam Baldwin character. He had like a machete in his back pocket the whole time, and he chops the head chops the kid's head off in the film, and that was I guess to Kubrick that was like, yeah, it's a bit too distasteful and not really, like we got to cut that out. And there was another scene where it's like they were gonna have like a bunch of the soldiers kicking around with like a soccer ball. Yeah, I said it's soccer, sue me, international people. And they were kicking around a soccer ball, but it's revealed to be like the head of the Viet Cong. I think I could be wrong, but
Kubrick is many things. He's not a shock director. He's not gonna. He doesn't strike me as a guy who would have just used gruesome things for the sake of it. Which
yeah,
is
like
why
Eli Roth
yeah, or
with the
even
Hostel
like
films.
what's his name? The what's the guy who did the Trash Humpers? What those movies called?
I have no idea.
Harmony Korine. Where he's like he's
Oh
just a really
yeah, I
really
know. Yeah, I know what you're talking
depressing.
about. Yeah,
He's just a really like morbid kind of guy, and it's if morbid without purpose feels exploitative. And I think Kubrick always made sure that if his characters did bad things, something, but bad things that were like not like this, there's always some kind of comeuppance, or there's anything that I'm kind of glad. Now that you mentioned the fact that what it was supposed to be, I'm glad that didn't happen.
yeah, because
Because
it ends on a note that felt satisfying enough to be like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. You know,
I'm I'd rather it end in like a mercy killing than just even what he says that's in the movie is like leave her for the rats, and I'm like, Jesus, man.
yeah, yeah.
And I think the fact that that still got in, like they're talking about someone who's still living, a child even, so it's, and the only real, they cut away from, they don't show her getting shot in the
No, it
same way
just
that,
you just see like a close up of Matthew Modine with the gun, and then fires the gun. And it's implied that he killed her.
no, it's definitely said.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not even implied. It's definitely text. Like they
that's true.
say, hardcore, man. They're talking about it.
Yeah, so that's pretty much our final thoughts on the film itself. And we're just gonna jump right into the awards section of the film. So first off, I have to ask if you think this was worthy of its writing nomination or not.
Personally, this isn't the first Kubrick movie I think it was a writer's movie. I think, as far as a movie about like its sole representation is this, I think there are other Kubrick movies where if it was just nominated for writing, I think would be better representatives than this. Like say, Eyes Wide Shut, possibly. I don't know, but I've heard, or even like what's that movie called? The one that's like, even if The Shining had just got nominated as a sole representation, I think that would have been more fitting because there's not much. It's a very dialogue free, more atmosphere movie, and I think it just got in just because of the battalion scenes and all of those. Because everything after that, there's not as much dialogue.
Yeah, well, and I was actually, well, and first off, I actually am fine that it got the screenplay nomination because I do think it is like a, like most of these films that get in for screenplay only, they tend to be a representative of the film as a whole. It's like we can't get you in other categories because of how competitive it is, or it's not like within the Academy's reach, but the writers branch will go in for you. And also too, it's about a journalist too. And they love their, films about writers, writing up their stories and such. And, so I think that could have been a factor as to why it got the lone writing nod.
I I think I'm overall happy with the nomination. I personally would have given it other things, but
Same.
I think we'll get to that.
In fact, we'll get to that right now. I first off, I don't understand why the fuck this did not get a cinematography nomination, guys. I do not get just you couldn't find some way to get Douglas Malsom. Yeah, you could not get him an Oscar nomination for this film. And I'm looking through the nominees, and the only one that
I have only seen like 3 of these movies.
Which ones have you seen?
I've seen The Winner, which is Lost Emperor. I've seen Broadcast News, which I don't get.
Yeah, okay.
And Hope and Glory, which I don't get either, because it's Hope and... Have you seen Hope and Glory?
And then I haven't, but go ahead.
It's mostly just like a movie that takes place in Britain. It's like a World War II British movie. So and I don't know anything about Model 1. And I've never seen Empire of the Sun. So
I've seen I've seen Empire of the Sun. And I actually think Empire of the Sun is worthy of its Oscar nomination for cinematography. The Last Emperor, from what little I've seen of it, which I might actually watch pretty soon, maybe this week, we'll see. The Last Emperor makes sense as a cinematography nomination. Hope and Glory, from what little I've seen of that, I assume there's like a big, it's a lot of like wide shots, establishing shots of the area in Hope and Glory.
Well, I think it got in because I'm looking at the guy. It's not like he had a big
Philippe Rousselot.
Yeah, it's not. He didn't have a huge, like a big thing, but I think he just got in because it was a picture nominee. I think that's why that one got in.
Yeah, but
I think it's that easy. But also, I'm surprised it didn't get a sound nomination either
for
sound work.
Yeah, I'm looking through what's the sound nominees that year. Empire.
I have the lineup.
It's a pretty tough category. I mean, yeah, Lethal Weapon had some really good sound work. RoboCop, Empire of the Sun had some really good sound work. Witches of Eastwick, which plays a lot with sound.
I've never seen this movie. I don't know what that is.
It's a George Miller supernatural comedy. Jack Nicholson is meted by 3 career women who essentially are witches, and it's so I'm curious in seeing that, but from what little I have seen of that film, and even the way George Miller uses sound in his films, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, that's a really competitive year for sound.
As far as like say R. Lee Ermey though, I'm looking at supporting actor and I have not seen Street Smart or Cry Freedom, but it's weird because I'm like, I think if he had more screen time, I think he'd be more likely to get in.
Yeah.
But or I think the character's just too unlikable.
Well, the problem with I think I remember Cry Freedom. That might have been a case of a lead actor going supporting.
I'm looking up who the main character
For Cry Freedom
seems to be Kevin Kline. Apparently,
okay.
is like the main character, and Denzel is also, I think, arguably a co-lead. But
Yeah. That's what
he
I've been told. And they for an actor like him, they probably just put him in supporting. And he was actually lead at the Golden Globes for the drama category too.
he is not even then. That was his fourth movie.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was that strong that you could say he would just through sheer will get into that category, but
For lead.
yeah. Or no, or I don't think you can make him lead in the same way that like other characters can be made lead with similar roles. But I think Ermi, though, as far as he is concerned, as far as his performance, he doesn't strike me as someone who would have campaigned earnestly for this role because
No.
the Oscars are really just a popularity thing.
That, but also Kubrick, he's not really the type of director, and I think this is part of the reason why his films have been very cold to Academy voters.
He has one Oscar, do you know that?
Yeah, for visual effects for 2001: A Space Odyssey, which was like a really weird set of rules they have for like who allows to get nominated for that. That was such a weird win. But I'm glad he's got an Oscar to begin with. But I think the problem with Kubrick, and it's kind of the problem that Wes Anderson has, and even Christopher Nolan until Oppenheimer did, they're just not the type of directors that make actors films, like the types of films that appeal to actors in general. Which is strange because the one film that did sweep that year at the Oscars was The Last Emperor, which
No
got
acting noms.
no acting nods, got 9 nominations, and did a clean sweep. Like nothing was going to stop that movie, and it's so strange. It couldn't even get in like Peter O'Toole for a supporting actor nod.
I think it's weird. I look back at films that like that, and I'm like, how can this film do 8 or 9 nominations and not a single acting nom?
Yeah, same with like Slumdog Millionaire.
Well, you know what's even a good example is, what was this movie a couple years ago? I'm like, what made Ian McKellen so great in the first one, but that he didn't have in Lord of the Rings 3?
Because, well, that was a case of we really liked Fellowship of the Ring. We liked the character because he's like a supporting, wise character. But Return of the King, it's essentially the same performance, and we have we also have other films we want to fill in the spot for. I think that's why that was.
The year before this particular year, Paul Newman was nominated and won for a sequel character though.
Yeah, The Color of Money.
So it's not like.
But the thing is though is that it's not going to be like not everyone's going to have that same scenario or kind of story. And lead actor that year when he won for The Color of Money, he won it in a year where there was no competition. Like no one was going to beat him. It was almost like a his time moment, and he was in a popular enough film, and there were like a ton of other factors that helped Paul Newman get that Oscar win.
He'd won the honorary award literally the year before.
Well, that helped too. But yeah, there were other factors as to why that was. But anyways, so going back to Full Metal Jacket,
would you nominate this? Would you nominate R. Lee Ermey?
I actually would. I understand why the Academy wouldn't, because there's not much of a like character arc to that role. But I actually think R. Lee Ermey deserved an Oscar nomination for that performance. And
I,
I don't know if I would have nominated him, but I would have considered Vincent D'Onofrio as a potential, like, maybe I would put him in, but definitely more Ermi than D'Onofrio. That's for
the
sure.
I'd compare Ermi to Simmons from Whiplash, but the difference is Simmons is in a lot of scenes other than just like the main scenes that he in the college. He's
Yeah.
in like a jazz place. He's in other concert areas.
Mhm.
He's he's at dinner. He's at you see him spread throughout the whole story. And I think because Ermi he's in the first half and then once he's gone it feels like the movie's just he has nothing. Like the movie just doesn't care about anything that happened prior. I think it feels like two different movies for that exact reason. Like if he was sprinkled in more,
Mhm.
then and I don't know
Maybe it
how
could
he would have
happen.
done that. No, I don't even know if he gets nominated, but I think if he sprinkled in more throughout like his role
Yeah.
and like I think he could have gotten in.
But to be honest though, like I said though, like Kubrick is just not like he doesn't make movies that appeal to the actors. Like he just wants to make a movie that he wants to make, and that's fine, honestly. But I think the Academy had an issue of his cold, look, his cold feeling that voters come out of or audiences come out of, even though they're really thought provoking movies and they're really interesting and complex and make you question things. But I think that's part of the reason why like Kubrick has never directed anyone into an acting nod.
Well,
Except
no,
for except for
actually,
one. Doctor Strangelove I think was one, right?
no, actually, he has directed two actors to nominations, and one of them was to a win, actually.
One of them was
And
two.
this, okay, so Doctor Strangelove he nominated, he got Peter Sellers in, but for winning, he got Pierre Ustinov in
Oh,
Spartacus,
Spartacus, yeah.
which is such an odd win, personally, but that's not the most important thing. But yeah, he only nominated, he only got two actors ever nominated for his films,
Yeah.
which is why I think, and both of them were before like the 70s, which was I think his peak.
And
Was
it
like
got
60s.
Spartacus got Peter Ustinov, cinematography
Ustinov.
Ustinov, cinematography, art direction, and costumes. So
So I think that was the only film of his that really did well besides Barry Lyndon. I think those are the only two I think Oscar caliber movies he ever made.
for
That were,
actors.
for no, I'm saying that were deemed worthy for the Academy. That they give more than like a token win.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other categories they would have nominated the
Editing?
film for. Yeah, sure, editing. Yeah, that would be nice. Because it does move it at a pretty brisk pace enough. At least the first half does. Um,
I I'm just looking at what the editing was, and I'm like, honestly, I kind of see the case for all these movies for best film editing, but
yeah,
the only one I would take out is broadcast news because it's just odd. I would put Full Metal Jacket instead of broadcast news for editing.
yeah. I'd have to watch broadcast news, but already that's starting to. The more and more I see of that movie, it's starting to piss me off that got in for cinematography and not director. Not director. I'm sorry. That got in for cinematography but not Full Metal Jacket. I had to
I
correct myself.
I think it's just one of those movies that year it just pissed off a lot of people who I think even like now they're just movies that we know aren't gonna appeal to them, so they're not even gonna try. They're not even gonna give token acknowledgement to, and it sucks. 'Cause I think Kubrick movies are the best example of maximalism. I think that anyone was able to do outside of Orson Welles or Hitchcock. I think he was our I don't know one of our greatest living directors. So
Yeah.
it feels like Scorsese now. How it's like it feels like we take him for granted because he gets in, but we can't. But no one can get him or his films anything anymore.
Yeah,
So I
because he
feel
doesn't
like
make movies that appeal to Academy voters anymore. And even when he did, he only got his films got the wins, but not him.
I think, in a weird way, I think Kubrick could have won for. I think the only way Kubrick wins is if it's a Best Picture winner, and nothing he ever made was a picture winner.
Well,
It,
and the problem that Kubrick always had as a director, I feel, was they saw him more as a director first, writer second. And whenever he did get nominated for director, he always lost to a much bigger a movie that appealed more to Academy voters. So you had,
he lost to Mary Poppins.
yeah, well, no, he lost director to My Fair Lady. He lost
Sorry, you're
director
right. That's
again
right, yeah.
to Oliver. He lost director for to The French Connection, and then
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
yeah. So they were
which that one actually kind of bothers me a little bit because that's not a directorly movie, and I think 2001 I think is his best directed movie, maybe,
Yeah.
but I think 75 was his shot. Like Barry Lyndon, it was like the kind of movie that they would recognize in like the actual. But I think it was just too long and too oblique.
Yeah, and it was appreciated more for the technical crafts, Barry Lyndon, than the actual like directing. And also, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest appealed to the actors branch because
It's a good movie. It's just
you had 3 actor nominations. It won screenplay, and it was a Best Picture winner. So yeah, that kind of makes sense.
I just look back at like a Full Metal Jacket. Like the year it contended was just an unfavored movie because I think the way that branches work now is that they vote for themselves in the same way that like most director lineups from like the 1950s to the 2000s had like that one international director, even if the film didn't do anything else, or that one artsy director. I think Kubrick getting into screenplay feels like that. Like that felt when, like, say, Woman of the Dunes got into Best Director in 1964 or 65, or I don't remember the year, but I think his writing his writing nomination is just because the branch liked him,
Yeah,
and the Academy didn't.
and on top of that, they have a pretty piss poor memory of films that come out in the summer or earlier in the year, and whenever a film comes out later in the year, like The Last Emperor, and I'm pretty sure Fatal Attraction came out later that year too, compared to
I'm pretty sure all 5 nominees came out between at
like
least in the last 3 months of the year.
yeah, like
Last Emperor was
November, I think.
okay. Broadcast News was December.
Yeah.
Fatal Attraction was September. Hope and Glory was November. Well, actually February for the U.S.
Yeah.
And Moonstruck was December.
Yeah, so they just have a piss poor memory of like any movies that come out before fall. It's like, yeah, we don't really remember. Did they really come out? No, they didn't. We're not going to give it a picture then. Yeah, they
It's
always
so
have
funny because now it's different. Now that movies can come out early in the year and be contenders for like the 3rd year in a row.
Well, yeah, because of the way the Academy voting branch as a whole has changed from the 80s to now, and now that we have 10 Best Picture nominees, they don't all have to come out in December or November or October. They could actually come out like Past Lives could come out in the summer. You could have Top Gun Maverick come out in May. You could have Elvis come out in June, and it still gets in for Best Picture. So
I think I would love to have seen Path of Glory get nominated. Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah,
but I still think it still might have struggled even in a 10. Because for whatever reason, because 87 is one of those years where you look back on it and you're like, oh, this film, like Wall Street or The Untouchables, did very well, or Dirty Dancing did well. And these are movies that you think are more likely to get into 10 than this movie.
I don't know about Dirty Dancing, but I definitely do think Untouchables definitely would have gotten into the lineup. My Life as a Dog would have gotten into that 10 lineup.
Empire of the Sun gets in. I mean,
Empire of the Sun. Yep. Yeah, that would be, what are we at, 7? Yeah. And then
so over time, but the 5, Empire of the Sun, Untouchables, and
My Life as a Dog would definitely get in.
That's 8.
Yeah, because it got
I
the
th-
director nod.
I think Wall Street gets nominated, but doesn't. I think if you're winning a lead category, you're at least considered.
And yet the
Maybe.
Whale it won lead actor and it missed Best Picture.
I think The Whale was number 11, but it's a different story for a different year.
Yeah.
But I think you also have to say, like, how did I'm just looking at the other movies even in that screenplay lineup, but like The Dead is John Huston's last movie, or I think that's why John Huston got nominated. I think
Well,
I
it was
look at
Tony
like
Huston got nominated for The Dead.
so you're right.
Yeah, who was the son of John Huston, by the way.
You're right. But it's because I think that was John Huston's last movie is why the film was recognized. And I think it's so weird that Lasse Hallström got nominated for this because I've seen the movie. It's good,
Life is a
but
Dog.
I don't think of it as a yeah. There were just a lot of films in the 2000s, in the 70s, 80s, 90s that would get director screenplay only, but they were like international movies, but never even into their own category. Then I'm just looking back on, okay.
Yeah.
And the only movie, it's so funny because I guess I'd rather give it to Last Emperor than say Fatal Attraction, which I do like, but that's not really a complicated story.
They were never going to go for that movie ever.
I think Last Emperor is a good winner here, even if I prefer Fullmetal Jacket as a movie.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we could go on and on about all this, but we're pretty much going to be wrapping up, I think, with our
what's your
discussion.
favorite Kubrick of what you've seen? The 5 that you've seen.
From what I've seen of the 5, I would have to say Barry Lyndon.
Okay.
Yeah. I got a lot more to get through from him, and I might have to rewatch a couple of them, but I think Barry Lyndon might be my favorite so far.
I could rank all 12, but I would basically say Doctor Strangelove is like my number 2 film of all time.
Oh, nice.
And
yeah, that's another one I got to rewatch.
And I think, honestly, I actually did rank the Kubrick movies of what I've seen, and it seems to be that the way I rank them is 2, 3, 4, 5. This is like number 6. This is, I think, his middle film. I think personally.
Gotcha. I think we could put a bow right there on the on the show. So thank you again for dedicating your time to be here on the show. Before we sign off, is there anything you'd like to plug in, or where our listeners can follow you along after the show is done?
Well, my Twitter is @JacobLovesFilm. I don't really have anything to plug, but maybe one day I'll like write movies, and then maybe I'll even have a lone nominee for writing one day, possibly.
Gotta find a lot of names in Hollywood that'll back up that script of yours and get a lot of actors involved.
I think honestly it would be really funny if I was the sole representation of a movie. If for no other reason than it would just be just enough for me to not be like I'm not winning, but I just want to be there in the room. So I don't have anything to plug, but I would just say more. I guess maybe just plug more like 50s movies, like some early Kubrick is also really good. I think Kubrick is just the best director that we ever had. It's just personal opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. As for me, you could follow me and the show through Linktree under @Matthew995, where you could follow along on all my social media accounts, such as Twitter and Letterboxd. On the same site, I provide a link for where you can listen to more episodes of the show. And if you're interested in being in the hot seat, let me know, and hopefully we can arrange that happening soon. In the meantime, we hope you enjoyed listening to this episode, and we hope to see you at the movies. Take care, guys.